tonight, there is growing concern among the NYPD over Venezuelan gang activity across the city. Police believe some gang members are recruiting children living in migrant shelters. The gang has blended in with asylum seekers.
So now gangs are recruiting teenagers and children from various asylum shelters all throughout the city. A task New York helps them accomplish because as a sanctuary city that doesn't do background checks, it's been placing gang members in its shelters near families for months now. And the levels of gang activity happening in New York are now so high that even the mainstream media is being forced to cover it.
Undocumented criminals as young as 11 years old are carrying out retail robberies and committing crimes on scooters, snatching people's jewelry, watches, and cell phones at gunpoint and knife point. Over 300 incidents last year, more than 800 so far this year. They've brazenly shot at police officers, too.
And we begin this hour with the arrests of 2 members of a violent Venezuelan gang tied to that now viral raid of a Colorado apartment complex. The 2 men were taken into custody this week in New York City.
The NYPD is cracking down on Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang they say is living in the shelter system and recruiting children.
Once they commit their crimes, they go back to the migrant community. We have no fingerprints on file for them. We have no photographs on file for them. We have no prior criminal history on them.
People have warned us to be careful with the child because they are recruiting younger children. It worries me a lot. We're afraid he will get recruited and they will force and manipulate him to do bad things, things that will get him into trouble.
So according to federal immigration authorities, 58,000 criminals now live in New York City. But what nobody's talking about is if this massive number of criminals is going to take a long time to track down, and if New York remains a sanctuary city, things like gang activity and crime could continue growing while authorities try to stop it. And that seems to be the agenda of many dangerous organizations like this Tren de Aragua gang from Venezuela, which operates within the very shelter systems New York City claims it's designed to benefit the homeless 220,000 and counting asylum seekers who've come here and aren't criminals, while it also houses the very criminals that destroyed their home countries, revealing that sanctuary city laws aren't at all helpful to the very immigrants our leaders say they're designed for. Because law-abiding immigrants do not benefit from sanctuary rules that help criminals and fugitives, many of whom make a living exploiting the tired, the weary, and the vulnerable, using them as human capital to sell things, steal things, and even forcing them to commit crime all over town. Which brings us to the real reason why gangs recruiting young people is an absolute disaster that's unfolding before our very eyes. Not only are young people more likely to be impressionable and moldable, but if they get caught committing a crime, our state also has laws that won't try them as adults. And if you thought New York's revolving door justice system was easy on adults, try not to be surprised when you find out it's even easier on minors, oftentimes releasing dangerous individuals who return home to the very asylum shelters where many of their crimes are premeditated. And as you're about to see, these individuals are being recruited by some of the most dangerous people on the planet. So this building behind me is the Stewart Hotel. It's an asylum shelter reserved for families where you'll find not just moms and dads, but also children and teenagers, which might not sound weird to you. But what is weird is that as we're learning today, the city doesn't do anything to prevent people from moving into places like this who might have a criminal record or might be part of a gang. And go figure, gangs have been using this type of opportunity, which doesn't just exist in a building like this, but at any shelter in town, to try and recruit the very people shelters and care facilities like this are designed to protect.
The NYPD is cracking down on Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang they say is living in the shelter system and recruiting children.
We have no fingerprints on file for them. We have no photographs on file for them. We have no prior criminal history on them.
This is incredibly frightening. The NYPD is combating gangs who are able to blend in, become incredibly hard to find, and have no criminal record in any U.S. database. Furthermore, their presence inside facilities like this makes them a danger to the entire asylum seeker community that lives here, which is comprised of many people who fled these very same gangs in their home countries after they were destroyed. To make matters worse, as a sanctuary city, police are not allowed inside these facilities to patrol them and maintain law and order, because there is some sort of view here that law enforcement and immigration are somehow toxic to each other. Plus, what's even more frightening is that this Trende Aragua gang, it's unlike any group existing in America. It was started in a Venezuelan prison, and the members of the gang ended up getting released and have made their way to America. And the Venezuelan government, they know who these criminals are. They've got background information on them, but they don't share that with the United States. And when the U.S. apprehends these individuals and wants to deport them, Venezuela refuses to take them back, revealing that once these dangerous individuals make their way to a sanctuary city in America, they could be here forever. And although the new border czar is on record stating that that will not be the case when the next administration takes over, our current leaders have no answer to what amounts to an advanced criminal organization they are totally unprepared to deal with. And that's obvious. They're taking over apartments in certain parts of the country. They're operating within the very shelters our city has designed to help people. And what's so frustrating about this is even though our police officers say these criminals are hiding in plain sight, we know where they live. It's just impossible under current sanctuary city rules like the ones we have here for the police to do anything about it. And now they're recruiting minors, which is an even bigger deal once you realize that when these individuals go out and commit a crime, there are essentially no consequences.
The NYPD's chief of detectives says undocumented criminals as young as 11 years old are carrying out retail robberies and committing crimes on scooters.
When they go before a judge in New York City and their arrest record is run, they show no prior criminal history and they're released back into the public.
Some migrant mothers we spoke to.
You know, what kind of place lets you do all that and nothing happens to these individuals? What kind of legal system is that? Is anybody surprised that we've got this kind of problem going on in New York right now? And are we surprised that the city's been experiencing a rise in moped-related crimes all year long, along with the robbery spree in Central Park this past summer, or the shoplifting issues we've had all year as well? New York's soft on crime laws, combined with our sanctuary city policies, make this the perfect place for these gangs that are wanted by the federal government. Which is stupid, because we're told that sanctuary city status, decriminalization efforts, we're told that this makes the world a better place. But obviously it doesn't. It only makes the world a better place for people who make the world a worse place. So if our shelter system did background checks, they wouldn't find anything because there are no backgrounds on any of these individuals. But it gets even worse because if people are caught committing a crime, they don't lose the right to shelter. Oh no, you can end up in the back of this police car here for committing a crime, and after you get released, you can go right back to the place where you're staying, even if it's a city-funded shelter. There's no penalty for doing something here that's wrong. Nobody suffers any consequences. And now, according to the NYPD's chief of detectives, we've got kids as young as 11 out committing crimes that are incredibly frightening. And even though Mayor Adams has come out saying that he supports criminals getting deported, since New York's going to remain a sanctuary city, it remains to be seen how effective such a deportation operation is actually going to be. And crime here very well may continue trending in the wrong direction. And you know what? This whole sanctuary city thing, it doesn't even make sense to some of the asylum seekers. They wonder why criminals are allowed to live in their hotel next to them and do things that are wrong. It doesn't make any sense to them. Parents that live in one of these shelters call it chaos without structure, saying that these kids are out all night stealing and fighting and there's no accountability. Their parents aren't doing anything about it. And now what some people are wondering is, would that change if America's policies changed to be such that if someone commits a crime during an application process for asylum, they've got to leave the country? Because if that doesn't happen, some of the very people that may actually qualify for asylum are just going to be in danger.
Some migrant mothers we spoke to say they fear their boys will be forced into the world of crime.
People have warned us to be careful with the child because they are recruiting younger children. It worries me a lot.
Arada Piera and her 11-year-old son Dylan.
Yeah, this is all the proof you need that sanctuary city policies are bad news for anyone who's in America and is trying to exist here in a non-criminal capacity. Here we've got people who aren't criminals and they're afraid their kids are going to be forced to become criminals. Yet there are still people out there who want to say that any plan to get rid of the criminal criminal element that might be living here in New York is somehow a bad idea that puts immigrants at risk. But the question is, at risk from what? All asylum seekers have a legal right to stay here while their asylum case plays out. They're not somehow better off in a place that allows criminals to live next to them and bans police from coming inside. If anything, they're worse off, and they were tricked into coming to a place that they thought was safe, but is actually one of the most dangerous places they could have possibly come to. And from here, it almost looks like asylum seekers would be better off in a non-sanctuary city that did not help and harbor criminals. But it gets even worse, because even when the police receive a tip and get permission to enter one of these facilities looking for weapons, looking for contraband, looking for gang members, the gang members end up getting tipped off to the presence of the police. And that's exactly what happened when the tent shelters over at Randall's Island were raided a couple of months ago. Police went in, but according to investigators, the private security guards that monitor the entrance of the shelter tipped off the gang members ahead of time. Now, does that mean these security guards are gang members? No, but it does mean that they understand that the gang members are allowed in and out of the shelter whenever they want, and the police aren't. If these criminals are armed, if they're dangerous, what do you expect people to do when there's no law and order? And if they hadn't told the gang members the cops were coming, would they face consequences from the gang? At this point, our sanctuary city laws just empower criminals and help them do more of what nobody wants them doing in the first place. And with 58,000 criminals, according to ICE, hiding somewhere in New York, this could be too much even for Trump's new border czar. So the issue of gang-related criminal activity in the city is now so out of control that even the mayor now says, look, even though we're a sanctuary city, criminals, people who commit crimes, they have got to go. And to his credit, Mayor Adams is willing to work with the new presidential administration to clean up the streets here, something other sanctuary city mayors have said they're not gonna do. And a city full of criminals who do not fear the law and never seem to get sent to jail even after they do something really bad, that's a crisis. That puts everyone in danger. And according to ICE, there are now over 1,000 gang members hiding out in New York benefiting from laws that protect them. And what's truly remarkable is that New York doesn't have other elected officials saying anything about this. It's the mayor, it's a small handful of Republican lawmakers, but nobody's talking about rolling back some of these dangerous policies that don't actually help immigrants.
Will the deportations be at the scale that Trump has expressed, what he promised along the campaign trail?
There's a lot of pushback I hear from, mass deportation, people saying, well, that's radical, it's racist, it's un-American. It's just ridiculous. Based on immigration court data over the last 10 years, nearly 9 out of 10 of these people will end up with an order removal because they simply don't qualify for asylum. What they did is commit asylum fraud. So when you have millions of people coming across the border, 9 out of 10 will get an order of removal from an immigration judge. Of course, there has to be an historic deportation.
Did you catch that? 9 out of 10 people could fail to qualify for asylum because their applications might be fraudulent. If these folks are law-abiding, they will abide by the process and any order that comes from an immigration court after their asylum claim concludes. But if they're not law-abiding, New York City's laws might enable them to break other laws in the future. And that's bad news because, as we've already seen, background checks are really non-existent for this whole process. And if someone fails to meet the qualifications for asylum because it's discovered that they are affiliated with a gang or they've committed crimes in a city like New York, things here could become even more dangerous. Which again brings up the question, who are sanctuary city laws really benefiting if it's not the law-abiding? Think about it, the law-abiding have nothing to fear from the police because they're not breaking any laws, they're obeying the rules. Only somebody who's intent on disobeying the rules, somebody like a criminal, somebody like a gang member, somebody who wants to recruit teenagers in New York City shelters, that person, they've got a lot to fear from authorities, and that's why many of them may make their way here if this deportation agenda actually gets kicked off next year. But it gets even worse because sanctuary city status just encourages lawlessness. It's not like a criminal can come here and change their ways and live a normal life. That is actually impossible because if you're here and you're not supposed to be in the country, getting something like a normal job and having federal work authorization, that's probably not going to be possible, which means the only way people will be able to survive survive is to do it in an off-the-books manner, which could be illegal. And if someone truly wants to reform their ways and play by the rules, they're gonna have to do it by the rules. They're not gonna be able to cut corners. They're not gonna be able to come to a place like this and hide from the law. That's just not gonna work. And not only does it not work, one's presence in a sanctuary city trying to exist in an off-the-books manner just puts them at risk from the very criminals that benefit from these laws, like these gang members. They profit from human exploitation. They are forcing people to join their gangs as foot soldiers, telling them that they will hurt their families back home in Venezuela if they don't join, or that these people will be branded as outsiders, enemies of the gang. Who wants that in a place where gang members are protected? That's bad news.
If the court order doesn't mean anything, if the judge order doesn't mean anything, then what are we doing? We're sending a message to the entire world. You can cross the border legally, which is a crime. You can be released in the United States, either go to court or not show up in court and get an order removal, and we're not going to remove you. The whole world's going to come to this.
Now, depending on your views, the entire world may in fact have been trying to come here over the last 2 to 3 years. But the new borders he makes a good point, which is that without some laws, we don't really have a country anymore. We don't have a border. There's no law and order at all if we're not going to enforce the laws that we have. And New York, America's largest sanctuary city, this place is a great example of what can happen when those laws are not followed, or when a city like this sets up laws that exist in opposition to them. This place is more dangerous for immigrants than many cities in the country. I mean, where else in the country do you have gangs openly selling stolen products on street corners in middle-class neighborhoods? Where else do you have gang members living in care facilities that are supposed to help people get back on their feet, destroying the mission of those facilities, making them useless? And what exactly do these laws and policies even do to help a city like New York care for women, children, the vulnerable, the exploited, the destitute? How do these laws that endanger those people actually help them? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.